Hey everyone, today we bring to you an exclusive interview with the founder of Save Souls, David, aka the Captain. And now we'll get straight into the interview. Hey David, how are you doing?
What's up, Ritter? How's your day going?
Amazing. Thank you so much for asking. And thank you so much for being here and taking the time. Yeah, let's just get right into the interview. So, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your life before Web3, and how your journey began in the space?
Yeah, of course. So I am 35 years young, which is a old person in the Web3 space. But for myself, I've been in sales my whole adult career, pretty much sales since I was 18 years old, and just got really deep into personal development, reading, and then having aspirations for something bigger, creating something that could change and enhance a lot of people's lives. And I was trying to figure out what that was for a long time. And prior to Web3, I got into the insurance industry. So I was selling property and casualty, so auto and home insurance. And then after that, I moved into the life insurance and annuity phase, which I did pretty well there. And then shortly in between that little intersection, I got introduced to crypto and Bitcoin right around 2017, 2018, and started playing around in the space. It was so new to me and it was such a fun experience to learn what blockchain technology was. And I remember I was getting really into DeFi when I learned about the concept of staking. And staking just blew my mind as well with the whole APY percentage that could be made and so on and so forth. And so when NFTs first hit my radar, it's because a company or a project called CyberCon was releasing something called staking. And it blew my mind that you could stake an NFT. And that just opened the doorway for me jumping into the whole industry in itself. So I got in late 2020 and I was a trader, just trading projects, trying to flip things, obviously bag holding and so on and so forth the whole time. But it's been an adventure. It's crazy to think that it has almost been 4 years to the date since I got into Web3. And it's been powerful, impactful in terms of how I view new markets, how I see the whole space as a whole. And as I watch it evolve into something much bigger, it's been such an exciting process. So that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. Yeah, that's very nice to hear from your sales background. I'm sure that for sure some skills of those they transfer directly to Web3 because the space moves so fast. You definitely have to, sell to people, market yourself, and you being a founder, I'm sure that helps a lot. It's great to hear that before you became a founder, you were a DJ and you were a participant in the space, and you also got inspiration from projects like CyberCon. So that's amazing. Okay. So let's get into the next question. So when did you decide to create an NFT project, namely Save Souls, and what inspired your art choice?
Yeah, 100%. As you mentioned, we minted in 2023. And so over the course of the 3 years, I was a participant in the space and I'd met some amazing people along the way. The great thing about Web3 is you meet people that you'd probably never meet, such as us connected today. But I also met my team through the NFT space as well. They used to be DGens. Now they're retired from DGenning and just building. Was exciting. 2021 was very exciting. And then 2022, there was a shift in the space. We went from this optimistic hope to this pessimistic, bearish sentiment where everyone became very tribalistic, very nasty. And it just became very strange to me because Web3 is a conglomerate of people around the world. And yet we were still creating tribalism. For myself, the team, we just thought this is crazy because this is such a cool industry. This is something completely brand new. We believe that blockchain can be absolutely revolutionary across time and space in terms of the demographic and macro economy of what we're going to be looking at over the next few decades, if you will. And it's just very sad to see new participants who come in, they'd get rugs, they lose all their money, they get drained, whatever the case is. Like we've all been there, like a rite of passage in the most unfortunate way possible. But it's just terrible because we know if something like that happens to you and you lose a portion of your money, you're likely to never come back to the space. And if you do, you're going to be incredibly pessimistic about it and just so negative. And so for us, when we created Safe Souls, it was designed to be for the people who felt like Web3 was their calling card, for people who wanted a safe sleep 3 was all over. So that's how it came along. As for the inspiration, we wanted to go back to a more nostalgic time, something that felt good, something felt new, felt like a simpler time where there's less time or responsibility. So for us, we all grew up in the 90s. So we're like 90s babies. So we grew up on Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. So things like Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Rocket Power, and so on and so forth. So for the art was inspired by like 90s Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network shows, just so it gave people that little nostalgic feel, even if it was subconscious, to make them feel safer, feel better, feel more at home. And then we just drew the inspiration off of that with the life preservers and the life rings. We were throwing the life rings out to the degens of Web3 who needed to be saved because they were quote unquote drowning in the rough seas of everything. And so that's how it all came to be. It was nostalgia with a twist, our inspiration and a life raft to save people to bring them in.
Yeah. Wow, that is yeah amazing. And like you mentioned, there is that change in sentiment, it turning in the space turning tribalistic. And even though we all say different numbers, but you could approximate there's only around 25,000 people active, which maybe currently or even at somewhere near the peak. So that's definitely not the mindset we should be in. We should all be collaborating. So it's great to see that you're aware of that and you acknowledge it and you integrate it within your project. And then, yeah, with your art choice, the life preserver, that's amazing. It perfectly fits with your name, Save Souls. You're literally saving souls, throwing life boys out. So that's very nice to hear. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How was your project funded before minting? And now, obviously, like you mentioned, there was this change in sentiment with the bear market and all that. So, how are you currently managing the cost post mint? And is that model sustainable for you?
Sure. That's a great question. So for us, we were self-funded. So it's funny because what could be deemed as our biggest hurdle has become our biggest blessing. And it's all about perspective and how you look at things, right? So when we minted, it was April 5th, 2023. So it's fair market sentiment's pretty low. For us, it was a passion project. It was like, let's just do something different. Let's stand out. We felt like the bar was so low in the space that anyone that came out with anything exciting, someone that could actually execute on something would make a wave and make an impression. And that's what we did. We didn't have any funds to start with. We're all self-funded. So in the sense of for myself, for Richie and for Arkham, we literally were just good at what we did. So I'm the face of the community manager, marketing, and so on. Arkham is our dev who's been a Solidity dev for the past 10 years. And then Richie has been a designer for the past 15 years. Together, we just brought our strengths together and made it happen. So no money up front. We minted as a free mint. We did charge 0.009 ETH for any additional mints. So those are free mints plus 0.009. We ended up making right around 30 to 40,000 is what we raised initially off mints. And again, establishing trust in the market was big for us. So we left those funds for quite a while. I know a lot of markets or a lot of projects will mint and then they move the funds right away and it scares people because they see the money move off the smart contract. But we left it there for probably a good 90 to 120 days. And we just decided to start building. One of which is it forces us to build. We're all entrepreneurs by trade. So it's a eat what you kill mentality, meaning if you want to get paid, go produce value. And we know if we took a payday, it's easy to get comfortable right there. The minting process itself is the starting line, not the finish line. And so once we minted out, we were pretty much off to the races. We already had things planned, ready to go, and we were just executing from day one. For us, that actually drove in a decent amount of royalties. Over the past year or so, we did right around 1900 ETH in royalties. Obviously, we didn't do 1900 ETH. There's a 5 to 7.5% royalty, but we were able to make a living, support everything, pay for costs, and so on and so forth. Post mint, that has been sustainable for us because we have such a lean team. We didn't come into the space with 5, 7, 10 people. It was literally just us three, our talents, and obviously cost of what we were doing. So for us, it has been sustainable. Obviously, funds are a little bit lower at this point because the market has dried up. NFT sentiment has come down a bit. People aren't buying assets just to trade them as much. They're buying them more so to collect now, which is fine. That's actually how, in my opinion, it should be. As for sustainability, I don't think that is a sustainable market to just live off of royalties itself. I do think that worked in 2020 and 2021 and possibly 2022. But as the market grows and it pivots and it adapts a new philosophy or a new entrance into the ecosystem, if you will, I don't think that just living off royalties itself is going to be sustainable. Just like any business, I think there has to be different verticals and different things that actually bring intrinsic value that drive the market in a different direction. So yeah, I don't think it's sustainable anymore, which is completely fine. Things are meant to grow and adapt and evolve. And I think that's just where the market is right now.
That's amazing. And I'm very glad to hear that you're aware that it's not sustainable. It's better to face the reality and especially tell that to your community and move forward accordingly. And like you mentioned, pivot, plan different things, create different revenues. And obviously you have games and you're gamifying it too. So I'm sure you're already looking forward to that and doing all those things in the background. So that's amazing. And also you mentioned you were completely bootstrapped pre-mint. So that just further shows how invested you guys are and how legit you are. So that's really amazing. It definitely is good to see that in this space. You mentioned
Sure.
Arkham and Richie are your
Mhm.
teammates. So did you meet those two like through Web3 or were you guys already familiar with each other in your past life?
Yeah, great questions. We met through Web3. They live in a different country than me, which is amazing. Wild stuff happens in the space all the time with people that you've never met. But we all met through a mutual project together. And we're, you know what? I think we can do this. I think the bar's low enough. I think we have enough skills that we can actually go make it happen. And obviously it worked. We had the right vision, the right passion. and the right heart space to go make it happen. But yeah, I met these guys all through Web3. Just became really good friends from there.
So Web3 is good for many things, making new friends and following your passion projects, creating a team. That's great. All right.
Yeah.
So let's get into some questions that are now a bit more general and about the NFT space. So
Mhm.
what do you as a creator think are the biggest challenges in the current NFT space? Like you mentioned, taking into regard the current sentiment for NFTs.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is you're in a unglamorous period of time. That's the hardest thing, right? And we always hear like the ideology of buy low, sell high kind of deal, but actually doing it from an emotional standpoint, a psychological standpoint, way harder than it seems. If everyone bought low, sold high, a lot more people would make money, but obviously that's a whole different thing. And it's the same thing with building in a market, right? When things are exciting, it's fun because there's liquidity flowing around, but you are fighting for attention, which is the hardest thing. So if you can't capture attention, you're screwed there. But when the market sentiment like it is right now, when there's quiet periods in the time, there's lulls, you're building warriors, you're building captains, you're building trenches, you're building people that are okay with being at the ground floor because they have the vision to go further in time. So right now, I think the hardest part is just being okay with it sucking for a little bit. It's like being early to buy Bitcoin, like buying Bitcoin in 2014, you're probably laughed at and people probably thought you were stupid. And then fast forward 5, 7 years later, and you're the smartest person on the planet because you were there, you were in the trenches, and you were just learning and doing what you needed to do. And so I think that's just the price of being early in a space like this. It is true. When you look at what is possible, blockchain technology in general, it's still very young. It's still an infant and it has a lot of growing up to do. And with that comes growing pains. And yeah, that's the hardest part of the market. It's just understanding where you're at and being okay with it. And I think a lot of people are not being okay, being uncomfortable. But that's where the biggest growth is going to happen because when you look out on a bigger time horizon, it's all going to seem so small in the infinite possibilities of what you can actually do within the industry itself. So it's planting the seeds today so you can reap the harvest tomorrow.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more and couldn't say it better. You have to be okay with being comfortable. And like you mentioned, sometimes things are exciting, sometimes they're not, but you have to be able to survive. And I'm sure everyone knows things move in cycles. Sometimes they're up, sometimes they're down, but as long as you're there, you're surviving throughout it. Now, let's talk a little bit about trends. So, what trends in the NFT space excite you the most? And how do you see the future of NFTs evolving?
Ooh. So from a bias standpoint, gaming trends excite me. Just being a gamer myself, I grew up, I literally learned how to read because I wanted to play Final Fantasy when I was like 4 or 5. So gaming has been a whole part of my life. And that's obviously where the Sage Souls brand is leaning towards. I think gaming in general is just going to be massive once it gets figured out on a on-chain capability with it being seamless and not being so cumbersome with points of resistance within the quote unquote Web 2 to Web 3 space. I would say the evolution of blockchain. So when we talk about like RWAs, real world assets, excite me. Things that actually bring tangible value to the Web 3 space is what excites me. So it goes back to that growth and evolution standpoint where everything for a long time was just PFPs and that's like the starting blocks where we go. I think the PFP meta has to evolve. I think we need something bigger that actually makes sense to the real world that actually adds application to it. I know for the CoinNect team, like you guys are looking at some really cool stuff with capabilities of blockchain and what you can do with smart contracts and so on and so forth. So just the evolution of the technology in general is what excites me in terms of the trends itself.
How do you see the future of NFTs evolving? What do you think will be the evolution of them?
Yeah. So from like a gaming standpoint, I think it becomes pretty simple. Fortnite itself, I think if Fortnite wanted to become a Web 3 company, they could very easily. They've released the free products. People buy skins, assets, cosmetics. That's the most basic concept that like I was sold on. And it still makes sense to me. I think a lot of people would do it from a gaming aspect. Battle passes, etc., are really cool. There's a bunch of cool gaming companies that are working on transactional based revenue models, which I think is really smart. I think the freemium gaming model in general, as long as it's not eye gouging in its approach, is really smart and making something that's super fun and tangible to a lot of people. So something that has to be recognizable. When I think of how you get bigger adoption, has to be easily recognizable, very discernible, and then along with that has to be easily accessible. There are a lot of friction points that we have within the gaming, especially when you're looking at on-chain. There's a lot of transactions to side, MetaMask, and so on and so forth. Once we get to like non-custodial wallets and it being a seamless transaction for you to hop in, play, hop out, and not realizing that you are in a Web 3 game, I think that's where the trend really starts to boom. In terms of real world assets as well, I think that's just a matter of time before people start to actually understand what's happening with an asset tied to something digital and it just being married together.
Yeah, you're like on the ball and you definitely have so much knowledge about gaming and gamification of Web3 assets. So just one follow-up question, obviously, since you mentioned Save Souls is also getting into gaming and all that. So is there any exclusive alpha you could drop with any upcoming games or upcoming events for the Save Souls?
Yeah, for sure. Over the course of the past a year and some change, we've been building these different gamification events. There are more so community building events at the core of it, but we just gamify the lore and the story of Save Soul itself. We've done pretty well. It's been a building block that's been gradual progression, each iteration and gamification phase. We're at the end of our final one for this story arc right now, which has been going on for quite a while. And that's quite okay because it's given us time in the background to build. And so as we talk about like evolution and adapting and pivoting, that's what we're doing now. So we know that what has worked in the past will not always work in the future, right? And if you do what you've done before, you're guaranteed to get the same results. And so for us, we've decided to pivot and we'll be pivoting in what we believe is a massively beneficial way. And it's going to be a little bit different than what we're used to. And that's okay because it hasn't been done as many times as everything else. I know it sounds really vague to say, but our tagline as we move forward is going to be nostalgia with a twist. And so we've learned enough over the past year and some change, bootstrapping this, knowing how the space works, knowing what sells, knowing how to market, and knowing how to move certain tickers. Nostalgia with be the whole Save Souls ethos as we move forward, but we are going to build something that is easily recognizable, something that we've all done, played before, and something that is very accessible to everyone outside of Web3, not just the participants inside Web3.
Amazing, amazing nostalgia with a twist that even has a ring to it. That's great. All right, great. So there you go, some exclusive alpha for the KOINectIt community and all the watchers. So keep an eye on the Save Soul page. All right. Yeah. So let's get into the next question. So like you mentioned, you really focus on your community and community building. So does your community's opinion and or feedback, so like after you do something or create an event, the feedback they give you, does that impact your vision or mission?
Yes and no. It impacts the mission, but not the vision. One thing that we always talk about is plans change, decisions don't. The decision to get to the finish line is always the decision to get to the finish line. How we get to the finish line is flexible and it does change. The great thing about Web3 is you get to be your own personal stakeholder within a small company. And it's great because you get immediate feedback. One of the beautiful things about Web3 is if you're open to it, the learning curves can be condensed so much because you can get feedback instantaneously from your consumers and customers. Like you don't have to wait for this to happen. Web3 is 24/7. People will tell you what's wrong all the time. And if you're open to that, that can be such a beautiful thing because you can learn so much faster. The Save Souls community was designed for the people by the people. And so we take all of our feedback very seriously from the community because they're the people that are pushing this. These are our frontline generals that are making this happen. And we've talked about this previously that as we built these building blocks, they're like mini beta phases. So our whole community has been beta testing the grand vision all along. So for us to ignore anything they have to say would be so silly. And multiple minds are better than just three minds, right? So like with the team and myself, we can see right here, but our community can see a lot more of this. They can see what we're missing. So I think anyone who's not receptive to their own community feedback in a positive manner, and it can even be constructive manner, is missing the ball completely. People want to be treated as people. They don't want to be treated as numbers. For a long time, people were just treated as numbers or ETH tags or whatever the case is. But the goal here is to make sure that everyone feels respected in every different way. Everyone has their own individual input. And although, yes, it may sometimes be like, there's some delegation involved. This is a great idea. We can't do this yet, but we can do it down the line in the future. I think if you're not listening to the community feedback, you're just messing the ball completely because these are the people that are here to help you co-create and build the vision of what you want.
Perfect. Yeah. Even me as a holder of some NFTs and projects, that's what I look in for the team, that they're listening to the community, taking their feedback. Because like you mentioned, having three people versus hundreds of holders who are all over the place, different projects and have different perspectives, definitely their feedback and their opinion is valuable. And yeah, like you mentioned, even if it's constructive or positive, both ways, it's great to see you taking advantage of that. Just last question. This is obviously more related to your projects. What sets your project apart from others? Now, you don't have to take any names or anything, but yeah, you can just focus on your project compared to the general market.
Yeah. Let me first start and say there are a lot of amazing projects, like
Yeah.
a lot of top tier teams, projects, communities, IPs in general. I think what sets Save Souls apart was just always the ethos and the mission and the vision. One of my favorite talks is by a guy named Simon Sinek, and he talks about start with why. And he talks about the golden circle of why, how, what. And for Save Sold, even our website today, even though we need to update it, the mission and the vision and the why is always there. It's designed for the people, by the people, who felt like Web3 was their calling card. Even without expanding into the vision of what Save Souls will ultimately be, people were joining Save Souls because it felt right within them, right? It was building that internal tribe. We're here to build something cool, but we don't want to shut anyone out. We want to bring people in. And I think that was such a huge thing for a long time. And it still is, right? It's still the idea of Save Souls. We're never trying to downplay anyone. We're not trying to token gate anything. We're inviting everyone in because this thing needs to grow on an international level, not just on a Discord level. But yeah, I would say that's our biggest thing, man, is we always started with why. We always came with the people in mind. It was always designed for the people to have something that they could co-create together. And even the existing community that we still have, it's just a bunch of leaders that are taking action. They're building on their terms in the sense of, I think people have been empowered to find what they're passionate about or how they want to grow in Web3. And they're utilizing the Save Souls brand or their position within Save Souls to help expand and grow that. Because obviously Save Souls is just one project and Web3 is much bigger than that. It's beautiful. It's a brilliant thing. So you start with one idea, it branches to a group of people that creates a tribe that creates ripple effects. And that's how we're different.
That's epic. I love to hear that. Amazing. So yeah, that should conclude the interview, covering all these amazing things from background to how you were inspired to your art to your vast knowledge about this space and the path you're taking with gamification and different revenue streams and how invested you are, how invested your team is, and you being aware of the harsh reality of the space. And then also, obviously, the trends and everything. And then the main thing that you mentioned is what sets you guys apart, that you guys focus on your community, on the why. I personally am after this interview very excited about Save Souls and very bullish on you guys as a team. So before we end, if you have any concluding remarks,
Well, thank you, Ritter. I appreciate you taking
of
time out
course.
of your evening to make this happen. The hardest part about being in the space today is just being in the trenches, right? Being here when it's quiet. And I'll finish off on the story. It's a story about a Chinese bamboo tree. And if you aren't aware, Chinese bamboo trees have the longest test of human patience. So if you buy a Chinese bamboo tree today, you probably get a seed and you plant that seed. And what happens with the Chinese bamboo tree is you have to be consistent. It's all about consistency. So the first year you water this Chinese bamboo tree every day without fail, nothing happens. Year two, you water the seed, again, nothing happens. And so you start to question, what is happening? I've been watering the seed for 2 years now, nothing's going on. Year three, same thing. Year five, if you are consistent enough, what will happen is that Chinese bamboo tree and that seed rather will sprout into a tree and it'll go from 0 to 90 feet within 5 weeks. And so the idea is, did that tree grow 90 feet within 5 weeks? Or were you working on the foundation, the love, the skill set, the soil, and everything in between to make it happen? The hard thing is you never know when that moment happens. So you just have to be consistent day in, day out, getting the thing done, working on yourself, working on the vision, the team, the people, and whatever it is. It's a culmination effect of consistency that ultimately leads to something greater. So if you're here in the market today, thank you for being here. It's obviously not easy, but just remember you're watering the seed. And at some point when it takes off, you're going to be blown away at the results, but you can also miss it as well. So if you're here, just make the most of it, have fun. So I'll leave off with that.
Wow, amazing. What an amazing analogy. And I'm sure all the listeners are extremely inspired from that. Let's go. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone, all the listeners, make sure to check out Save Souls. That's it. Thanks, David. That was amazing.